All right. Hi, everyone. This is the fifth part of my read of The Color of Magic. It's for the Lady Lark, who is wonderful and has been supporting me for a long time. She's also the reason I'm going to the International Discworld Convention in Manchester. I just booked all my hotels, my flight, and it's really happening. 100% happening. I can't. Anyway, so let's do this. This is now we're in the second part of the book. It's called The Sending of Eight. I fucking eight colors, whatever that thing is, octarine something. Okay, the road from Ankh-Morpork to Chiram is high, white, and winding, a 30-league stretch of potholes and half-buried rocks that spirals around mountains and dips into cool green valleys of citrus trees, crosses liana-webbed gorges on creaking rope bridges, and is generally more picturesque than useful. Ah, shit. Hate this fucking book. Picturesque. That was a new word to Rincewind the Wizard. Bachelor of Magic, Unseen University, failed. Thank you for putting that there, for reminding me once again that he's failure. It was one of a number he had picked up since leaving the charred ruins of Ankh-Morpork. Quaint was another one. Picturesque meant, he decided after careful observation of the scenery that inspired Two-Flower to use the word, that the landscape was horribly precipitous. Quaint, when used to describe the occasional village through which they passed, meant fever-ridden and tumble-down. Two-Flower was a tourist, the first ever seen on the Discworld. Tourist, Rincewind had decided, meant idiot. As they rode easily through the time-scented, bee-humming air, Rincewind pondered on the experiences of the last few days. While the little foreigner was obviously insane, he was also generous and considerably less lethal than half the people the wizard had mixed with in the city. Rincewind rather liked him. Disliking him would be like kicking a puppy. That's such a good way to distill down, like, he's like a puppy. Fuck, that's some deep shit. Okay, anyway, currently Two-Flower was showing a great interest in the theory and practice of magic. It just seems, well, rather useless to me, he said. I always thought that, a wizard just said the magic words and that was that. Not all this tedious memorizing. Rincewind agreed moodily. He tried to explain that magic had indeed once been wild and lawless, but had been tamed back in the mists of time by the olden ones, who had bound it to obey, among other things, the law of conservation of reality. This demanded that the effort needed to achieve a goal should be the same regardless of the means used. In practical terms, this meant to say that creating the illusion of a glass of wine was relatively easy since it involved merely the subtle shifting of light patterns. On the other hand, lifting a genuine wine glass a few feet in the air by sheer mental energy required several hours of systematic preparation if the wizard wished to prevent the simple principle of leverage flicking his brain out through his ears. He went on to add that some of the ancient magic could still be found in its raw state, recognizable to the initiated by the eightfold shape it made in the crystalline structure of space-time. There was the metal octiron, for example, and the gas octogen. Both radiated dangerous amounts of raw enchantment. It's all very depressing, he finished. Depressing? Rincewind turned in his saddle and glanced at Two-Flower's luggage, which was currently ambling along on its little legs, occasionally snapping its lidded butterflies. He sighed. Rincewind thinks he ought to be able to harness the lightning, said the picture imp, who was observing the passing scene from the tiny doorway of the box slung around Two-Flower's neck. He had spent that morning painting picturesque views and quaint scenes for his master, and had been allowed to knock off for a smoke. When I said harness, I didn't mean harness, snapped Rincewind. I just meant that... I don't know, I just can't think of the right words. I just think the world ought to be more organized. That's just fantasy, said Two-Flower. I know, that's the trouble, Rincewind sighed again. It was all very well going on about pure logic and how the universe was ruled by logic and the harmony of numbers, but the plain fact of the matter was that the disk was manifestly traversing space on the back of a giant turtle, and the gods had a habit of going around to atheist houses and smashing their windows. I'm so done with this book. There was a faint sound, hardly louder than the noise of the bees in the rosemary by the road. It had a curiously bony quality, as of rolling skulls or whirling dice box. Rincewind peered around. There was no one nearby. For some reason, that worried him. Then came a slight breeze that grew and went in the space of a few heartbeats. It left the world unchanged, save in a few interesting particulars. There was now, for example, a 5-meter-tall mountain troll standing in the road. That's not an interesting particular. That is a giant troll. It was exceptionally angry. Great. This was partly because trolls generally are, in any case, but it was exacerbated by the fact that the sudden and instantaneous teleportation from its lair in the Ramarork Mountains 3,000 miles away and 1,000 yards closer to the rim had raised its internal temperature to a dangerous level in accordance with the laws of conservation of energy. So it bared its fangs and charged. What a strange creature. You should be panicking, Two-Flower. What a strange creature, Two-Flower remarked. Is it dangerous? Only to people, shouted Rincewind. He drew his sword and, with a smooth overarm throw, completely failed to hit the troll. Oh my god. I love that this is a fantasy narrative with a wizard at the helm of the story, the center of the story, and he can't do shit. He's so awful. I love it. The blade plunged on into the heathers at the side of the track. There was the faintest of sounds like the rattle of old teeth. Teeth. I said teeth like I'm a baby. The sword struck a boulder concealed in the heather, concealed a watcher might have considered so artfully that a moment before it did not appear to be there at all. It sprang up like a leaping salmon and in mid-ricochet plunged deeply into the back of the troll's grey neck. What? The creature grunted, and with one swipe of a claw gouged a wound in the flank of Two-Flower's horse, which screamed and bolted into the trees at the roadside. The troll spun around and made a grab for Rincewind. Then its sluggish nervous system brought it the message that it was dead. These sentences aren't okay. I love them. It looked surprised for a moment at it being dead, and then toppled over and shattered into gravel. Trolls being silicaceous life forms, their bodies reverted instantly to stone at the moment of death. Oh, which reminds me of what's that amazing horror movie that came? Troll Hunter. It's a Norwegian movie. It's fucking amazing. I love it so much. You should watch it. Arr! Thought Rincewind as his horse reared in terror. He hung on desperately as it staggered two-legged across the road, and then, screaming, turned and galloped into the woods. The sound of hoofbeats died away, leaving the air to the hum of bees and the occasional rustle of butterfly wings. There was another sound, too, a strange noise for the bright time of noonday. It sounded like dice. Wait a second. Like the rattle of old teeth. Wait, I'm confused. Because didn't this book start out with a bunch of gods playing a game? How is he hearing I need this defined more. Anyway, where did Two-Flower... Let's read. Rincewind, the long aisles of trees threw Two-Flower's voice from side to side and eventually tossed it back to him, unheeded. He sat down on a rock and tried to think. Firstly, he was lost. That was vexing, but it did not worry him unduly. The forest looked quite interesting and probably held elves or gnomes. Perhaps both. In fact, on a couple of occasions, he had thought he had seen strange green faces peering down at him from the branches. Two-Flower, oh my god! They could be deadly creatures. He's never gonna know. Okay. Two-Flower had always wanted to meet an elf. In fact, what he really wanted to meet was a dragon, but an elf would do, or a real goblin. Oh my god. He's like those people who are into fantasy and just want to meet all the creatures in the world. Like the people who are like, I want to live in the Game of Thrones world. I'm like, you would die. You'd be dead. His luggage was missing, and that was annoying. It was also starting to rain. He squirmed uncomfortably on the damp stone and tried to look on the bright side. There's always a bright side for Two-Flower. I feel like he perpetually lives on the bright side. For example, during its mad dash, his plunging horse had burst through some bushes and disturbed a she-bear with her cubs, but had gone on before the bear could react. Then it had suddenly been galloping over the sleeping bodies of a large wolf pack, and again its mad speed had been such that the furious yelping had been left far behind. Nevertheless, the day was wearing on, and perhaps it would be a good idea, Two-Flower thought, not to hang about in the open. Perhaps there was he racked his brains trying to remember what sort of accommodation forests traditionally offered. Perhaps there was a gingerbread house or something where you will also die. I can't deal with Two-Flower. The stone really was uncomfortable. Two-Flower looked down and for the first time noticed the strange carving. Oh boy. It looked like a spider. Or was it a squid? Moss and lichens rather blurred the precise details, but they didn't blur the runes carved below it. Two-Flower could read them clearly, and they said, Traveler, the hospitable temple of Bel-Shamharoth lies 1,000 paces hubward. Now, this was strange, Two-Flower realized, because although he could read the message, the actual letters were completely unknown to him. Somehow the message was arriving in his brain without the tedious necessity of passing through his eyes. What the fuck? I wouldn't trust that. He stood up and untied his now biddable horse from a sapling. He wasn't sure which way the hub lay, but there seemed to be an odd track of sorts leading him away between the trees. You're just going to follow a mysterious path in the woods after getting oh my god. This Bel Shamharath seemed prepared to go out of his way to help stranded travelers. In any case, it was that or the wolves. Two Flower nodded decisively. Well, when you put it like that, it's actually not a bad decision. Eaten by wolves, follow a mysterious message to possibly get housing. I'd choose that too. It is interesting to note that, several hours later, a couple of wolves who were following Two Flower slant arrived in the glade. Their green eyes fell on the strange eight-legged carving, which may have indeed been a spider or an octopus, or may yet again have been something altogether more strange, and they immediately decided that they weren't so hungry at that. What is that stone? But 3 miles away, a failed wizard. It's like Terry Pratchett is taking every opportunity to remind us that he's a failure. A failed wizard was hanging by his hands from a high branch in a beech tree. This was the end result of 5 minutes of crowded activity. First, an enraged she-bear had barged through the undergrowth and taken the throat out of his horse with one swipe of her paw. Then, as Rincewind had fled the carnage, he had run into a glade in which a number of irate wolves were milling about. Oh, it's like wherever Two Flower goes, there's nothing that affects him, and it affects everyone else around him. His instructors at Unseen University, who had despaired of Rincewind's inability to master levitation, would have been amazed at the speed which he reached and climbed the nearest tree without apparently touching it. Now there was just the matter of the snake. It was large and green, and wound itself along the branch with reptilian patience. Rincewind wondered if it was poisonous, then chided himself for asking such a silly question. Of course it would be poisonous. What are you grinning for? He asked the figure on the next branch. What the fuck? I can't help it, said Death. Now would you be so kind as to let go? I can't hang around all day. I can, said Rincewind defiantly. The wolves clustered around the base of the tree. He looked up with interest at their next meal, talking to himself. It won't hurt, said Death. If words had weight, a single sentence from Death would have anchored a ship. Rincewind's arms screamed their agony at him. He scowled at the vulture-like, slightly transparent figure. Won't hurt, he said. Being torn apart by wolves won't hurt. He noticed another branch crossing his dangerously narrowing... He noticed another branch crossing his dangerously narrowing one a few feet away, if he could just reach it. He swung himself forward, one hand outstretched. The branch, already bending, did not break. It simply made a wet little sound and twisted. Rincewind found that he was now hanging onto the end of a tongue of bark and fiber, lengthening as it peeled away from the tree. He looked down, and with a sort of fatal satisfaction realized that he would land right on the biggest wolf. How was this book happening? Now he was moving slowly as the bark peeled back in a longer and longer strip. The snake watched him thoughtfully. But the growing length of bark held. Rincewind began to congratulate himself until, looking up, he saw what he had hitherto not noticed. I feel so bad for him. There was the largest hornet's nest he had ever seen hanging right in his path. He shut his eyes tightly. Why the troll? He asked himself. Everything else is just my usual luck, but why the troll? What the hell is going on? Click. It may have been a twig snapping, except that the sound appeared to be inside Rincewind's head. Click, click, and a breeze that failed to set a single leaf a-tremble. The hornet's nest was ripped from the branch as the strip passed by. It shot past the wizard's head, and he watched it grow smaller as it plummeted toward the circle of upturned muzzles. The circle suddenly closed. The circle suddenly expanded. The concerted yelp of pain as the pack fought to escape the furious cloud echoed among the trees. Rincewind grinned inanely. Rincewind's elbow nudged something. It was the tree trunk. The strip had carried him right to the end of the branch. But there were no other branches. The smooth bark beside him offered no handholds. What the fuck is going on? What is going on? I don't understand. Okay, I'm going to make another video and keep reading.